one of my friends, Neha, thanks to her, she kind of, got me introduced and gave me a perspective about, what Patruni does. And, the whole idea around, I think, diversity and inclusion, a very interesting question also was asked or thrown by Patruni on the latest LinkedIn post, which was around how do we have unconscious bias while having conversations. So great. First of all, thank you so much, Patroni, for joining in. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure that it's been very, very busy for you. So why don't we quickly get started with an introduction about yourself, the background where you come from and what you are doing right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Kapil, for inviting me for this wonderful conversation. And, especially today, because we are celebrating our 75th Independence Day, which is basically like we wear white clothes, as I'm wearing one, and, think about how exactly we got independence. So I think the idea of inclusion and independence go hand in hand. And it's a really wonderful evening to kind of chat about both of them in a far more subtler way. So, regarding me, I'm a drag artist. I have been performing drag for the past 5 years. But basically, I'm from a place called as Kharagpur, which is nearby, Kolkata. It's only famous for two things. One is the IIT, where there are no IITs from Kharagpur. And the other one is the longest railway platform, which talks about the poverty of the city. So I think these are the very two things which are really kind of popular in Kharagpur. Apart from that, I moved to, Hyderabad around 2014 for job. I was studying over here and then kind of moved over there. And it was a really kind of a different cultural shift for me because the city was something which was so different from where I'm coming from. And, that gave me a lot of space to explore my performance or explore the idea of gender and, all the other things which we'll be discussing as of today. So Hyderabad became my hub. It became the space where I was actually going ahead and doing a lot of work. So that is how, the journey started. And I'm still a software employee. So I work with a company which I can't name or else they will sue me. But I also am inclusion as well as, inclusion trainee. So I've been, giving trainings within the company as well as outside, talking about, LGBTQI plus inclusion within the workspaces and everywhere. So yeah, those are the couple of things which I do within my purview whenever I'm not working. But whenever I'm working, I just work. So that is how I kind of, balance both daytime job as well as drag together.
Awesome. It looks like life is not at all boring for you, and you make sure that you are living it to the fullest. It's really amazing. You spoke about drag, right? I'm sure that many of us wouldn't even know what drag is. So, do you mind talking about drag in India and otherwise globally as well? And how did this idea of Dragvanti came in, right? So, why don't you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So drag is basically a form of art which I learned, and I would say I would give the credit of drag to my dance because usually I was a dancer. I was learning classical dance, and I was performing classical dance as a hobbyist, if I could say. And while I was doing it, I went through this. I kind of bunched into a drag performer who was performing with me in an event in Bangalore. And when I, for the very first time, saw this particular performance, I thought, like, I can't do it because it's too expensive. I can't afford to have that wig. I can't afford to have that makeup, which is usually a tendency when we see something which is really luxurious. We want to have it, but we don't want to kind of, invest in it. So I think that was my situation then. And I wasn't quite sure of how exactly I would be able to, cater to that. But when I came back to Hyderabad, I see that there was a dearth of drag artists. Like we're not having drag artists at all. There's a dearth of nightlife as well, queer nightlife. So I thought, this can be a way of, changing or, making the space more inclusive or more visibly inclusive. So I think that was something which poured me in initially to pursue drag. And once I started pursuing drag, I don't know, there was something which happened. And since there, I was able to go ahead and, perform it without having any other notion.
Cool. And how do people see it? What were the initial comments that you had when you started performing drag? What possibly would have pulled you back, and then you thought that no, this is something that I'm gonna go ahead and do it irrespective of what people think?
Yeah, when I started doing drag, I was doing drag just like a corporate person because that's how I'm kind of learning it from. And usually what happens is like in corporates, we have this, ranking, marking and all that kind of stuff. Every corporate deals with it in a similar way. So I also had a similar kind of a thing. Like, I was always being marked upon, somebody who's already established, like, somebody who's been in West into RuPaul's Drag Race, and then being often compared with the drag queen from West as well as, from India. There are other people who have been performing in India. The style is different, their performances are different. So there's always a lot of comparison between, people to people and artist to artist. And my idea of drag is quite different. I'm not coming from a space where I want to kind of serve luxury or talk about the idea of beauty. For me, drag is more of, it's a performance where I can uh, uncheck the box of anything which is a rule. So I think that was really important, and that was my, I would say, motto of drag. Whereas, there was always a conflict of interest when some people kind of come and tell, oh, you should not be doing it in this way, or you should not be, performing it in this way. So that was one situation which I actually had a challenge which I have to overcome around, 2 or 3 times, self-realizing myself. The second thing was the idea of gatekeeping, and this is something which happens everywhere. Like within the LGBTQI plus community, there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to people who are actually doing work within the inclusion sector. For example, I identify as a bisexual or pansexual. I use both these terminologies to define myself. And when I identify with these two terms, or bisexuality or pansexuality, people always have a conviction that nothing like bisexuality and pansexuality are not something which is real, and they think that there's a lot of biphobia and panphobia within the community. So when I had the agency of performing drag with my queerness, they thought like, okay, I'm a straight person going ahead and doing drag. So that was a point of view which they had, and I had to break that ice, multiple times, and able to educate them that no, I don't fall into your category, but I have my own identity. So and then it's not even written like drag can be done by anybody. Like even people from the cishet community can also do drag. So if you are telling that that's the first rule, why exactly we gatekeep an art piece? So I think that is something which was another trouble which I was initially put into.
Cool, awesome. I think uh, overcoming all these troubles is something where you kind of decide to unleash yourself. So you did that. Amazing. Let's talk about diversity and inclusion a bit. Wherein in India, what do you think? How we are embracing diversity and inclusion? Are we prioritizing, or you feel that it is still being ignored? People do not really want to talk about it. What's your experience so far? In your corporate life that you've had?
So, I had two set of experiences. One as a direct employee, like, I'm working for a corporate. So I am the resource who is being hired by a company. And as a person, I need to ensure that the company is safeguarding me. So I'm having the direct customer experience, if I could say, when it comes to inclusion and diversity. But having said that, I was fortunate to have companies which I worked with who were quite vocal about inclusion, even if it's there's some of them which are India based companies who are startups. They had this entire idea of conversation and kind of making the shift or change when it is really required. And I also had the disfortunate to work with some really wonderful big MNCs who doesn't even have the understanding of transgender persons. So I think these are two different experiences which I carried. So one thing which I understood is like, it's not a hard and fast rule. So even when I'm talking about diversity, it's not just the managerial level who need to be who need to be aware about diversity. It's an overall organization which need to have that mindset. And it's again as somebody said, agile is a mindset. Similarly, diversity is also a mindset where you need to actually go ahead and change the entire perspective of the entire company. And how do we do it? Is it too much of a hard task to do? I will say no, because there are a lot of companies who are working globally and kind of working different time zones. What exactly happens when you're working with the US time zone and you are in India? You adjust the time accordingly, and you're ensuring that the business is continued even while you stretch a little extra mile to kind of deliver it. So similarly, when it comes to diversity, you need to adjust the time, or you need to adjust the terminologies or treatment how you exactly do it for your employees. employee, and accordingly, tune yourself or tune your mindset to be inclusive all the time. So I think that is something which is really important, and that is the approach which corporates has to do as well. So I would say some of them have already started it because they are again having a global presence. They know how exactly inclusion can benefit the business. Whereas there are some of them who are just doing it for the sake of doing it. Like if an XYZ company is doing it, I should also do it because that's my competitor. But not having an idea of what exactly is inclusion in the very first place. So these are some of the things which I see, when I kind of be a part of a corporate as well. And I ensure as a person when I'm joining a company, the first thing which I put in is like, is your company diversified? Or if you have a diverse background of people kind of coming in your work, or if you have a policy which is inclusion of, trans as well as non-binary people. Even if they say yes, if they are not quoting that on my orientation day, that's when I would get hands on that. Okay, this is not a company which I want to be with. So I think that is how inclusion should work, and that is how inclusion should be more visible than just being on the paper somewhere in the ground. So I think that is how I see inclusion as.
No, awesome. So I think you already spoke about various companies that are having those initiatives, and they're kind of adjusted themselves into the entire inclusivity and diversity culture, wherein there are bigger organizations who are still finding it hard. What do you think, or if you can possibly talk about a couple of behaviors or a couple of policies within a new organization that you think have been really, really positive with regard to employee as an experience, right? So the whole idea is that right now we have also largely been talking about, if at all it is about employee experience or customer experience, you need to make sure that anybody and everybody who is working with you is kind of feeling that it's an open culture. People are embraced here for wherever they come from. They are kind of say they are given a very high ranking in terms of their work, irrespective of what gender they kind of declare. So what do you think have been a couple of great initiatives, positive influencing things that you have seen in some of the companies that you work for, wherein you feel that, wow, this is really cool?
Yeah. So I think the very first thing is like, being open, as I said, being open right in the very first space. Like you hired a 20 or 2,500, people out in your company. And when you are trying to go and give them just the company orientation, why can't you just tell them that, it's an inclusive company? What if there is one particular queer person in that particular group who would understand or would take the advantage of that particular inclusion policy which you have in your place? So I think that is something which is really important to a company to have it. Like there are a lot of companies which are doing it. Like I have been working with two companies where they have openly kind of went ahead and said that we have a BRG which is actually working for queer people. We have this particular policy who can kind of take in. They had openly discussing and telling them there's no discrimination policy which is there within the company, and what are the multiple ways of discrimination about sexual orientation, like using the words. So I think that is the very first example of being really good at what we're rather proclaiming. Second is the idea of there are some companies who have kind of ridden the idea of background verification. Now, the reason why I'm telling about this is because usually there have been a lot of companies within India who have been hiring a bulk of transgender people from multiple localities. Now, when it comes to transgender people, they all come from multiple backgrounds. Some of them are, urban, some of them are rural. And when a trans person is kind of coming ahead, when somebody is kind of going and doing a background check, we are not sure whether their parents are allied with it or they have thrown out of the house. And, there are times where some of the transgenders are also somebody who are sex workers. So going ahead and taking the background verification is actually pulling out the dirty Pandora box, which they want to kind of forget in their life. So half of the times it's triggering for a lot of trans people. So those are some of the changes which have been done in a certain companies when they are hiring deliberately or kind of looking into people who are from the trans gender spectrum. The third one is definitely the pronouns. So there is always this hype of pronouns when it comes to corporates. And I think it's quite natural and easy to kind of understand and learn pronouns. And one of the best thing which one of the company has done is to have pronouns on their ID cards. Like you don't have to ask, you don't have to tell, but you can just see the ID card and then, use the pronoun. So I think that is something which is really simple as well as a wonderful way. Washrooms are something which is again a huge problem for queer people, and there are companies which have washroom for the sake of it, but it's in the extreme corner, just next to the storeroom where nobody will go when it comes to gender neutral washrooms. But there are other companies who have all of them together. They are kind of they're not labeled washrooms. They are open for everybody, and they're single door washrooms, whereas one person can go and then one person can come out. So I think those are some of the ways how policies can be made more reliable when they are being kind of put in place. So I think that is something which are good examples of how to kind of draft a policy and how to kind of ensure that they are being a part of corporate.
No, I think very interesting. In fact, at this juncture, I think I would like to kind of put up this point that while we had been deliberating about diversity inclusion for quite some time, looking at various aspects that would be important for us as an organization to make sure that we become a true, diverse, and equal, inclusive workspace. Uh, we had been researching it for quite some time, and finally we decided to put up. We have been into largely digital contact centers, transformation side of things in terms of business. While discussing this internally, we realized that obviously, as an organization, if we are supposed to be an impact or a diversity owned business, we need to make sure that we do those things. We walk the talk, right? When we were thinking around it, we decided to set up one location which would become a truly diverse, inclusive workplace. And then we said, what are the various elements that you would need, right? So one of the things that you mentioned very openly, that somebody would have a washroom, but it would be right at the corner, somewhere near the storeroom, wherein people would feel that should I go, should I not go? People would see me, all of it, right? So when we signed up our latest new location in Navi Mumbai, we decided that we would make it pretty open and clear. So we've got three washrooms next to each other, and the whole idea is that, okay, based on your orientation, you decide to go. If you don't want to disclose, there is an open washroom as well, which is a single use washroom, because you know very well that only one person can go in and one person can come out. Very small stuff, but very important as well, right? Two takeaways for me personally: that you can have an ID card which talks about your pronouns, right? So, in fact, when we started our conversation, I asked you what pronoun should we use, and you said that all, and I was like, wow, right? So it's really amazing. But when we have conversation, there is always a human psyche or bias that we've had. So from the times, since I've started seeing people work, wherever we talk about, there is an example talking about, say, if at all we are even in technical terms, we are discussing products and use cases and stories. We talk about, okay, there is a customer, he will be going there, then he would possibly see this, then he would think that this is how it should be. So he has already always been engraved in every conversation. You brought about a very important point about call centers as well, wherein you said that why do we even have sir or ma'am on calls whenever there are conversations happening? So why don't you talk about your experience on those side of things, and what was your suggestion? What do you think should be done? Wherein even if it is unconscious, we make sure that we kind of start to avoid it. I'm sure that there are people from customer service side, there are people from operations, that they would want to take away some of the things from this conversation. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and the reason why I actually wrote that article is because I was there in both the sides. Like I was a customer service agent for a while, and then I became a customer. So I think in both the sides, it was quite common that people kind of presume just by voice. Like voice is a kind of a gender signifier for a lot of people, and even today, when I kind of chat or kind of have a conversation with a customer care agent, either it's for a bank or for Swiggy or for Ola or whatever it is, there's always this, they kind of predict or assume the gender, which is quite, I would say quite personal for a lot of people, with a tone of a voice. So I think that was something which I kind of cracked in, because majority of the times when the Pride Month comes, you would see all these organizations kind of going ahead and talking about the inclusion, the aspect of it. But it's a very basic thing of, why can't you see your customer as a queer person or a gender neutral person? So I think that was the question which I kind of came in. And what I realized is, like, we are not putting that into our trainings. kind of informing the idea. Like a lot of the times when we are being a customer service agent, we are given a kind of a script. Sometimes we develop our own scripts. Like, sometimes if I'm working for a particular project, I have my own script to what to ask the question and how I can be empathetic, or how I can be kind of, say a service no. So those are some of the things which are there as a part of, I would say, a customer service agent. We develop our own language. But when we are developing this language, we are not kind of considering people that on the other side who might be genderqueer or trans person. So I think that is the one point of view which I think all of us need to kind of carry. And it's not a rocket science as well. It's just like there are better ways to address a person. There are better ways to ask a question. So when I was working in a call center, we used to always have one particular line like, how can I address you? So with that, how can I address you? Can you just say what are your preferred pronouns? So I think that would kind of help in making sure that you are giving that extra effort to the customers. Now, some of the times why the corporate does not want to use it is because they seen that half of the majority is heterosexuals or heteronormative, and there might be somebody who might get triggered if you are being asking this, but I think even if you're putting this particular word in your conversations with your own customers, it somehow gives a dialogue for you to kind of have, and you become the teachers for inclusion for the customers, for your customers. So you are also changing the identity as well as the idea of identities to your customers. So I think that is something where the organizations can be a change, catalyst as well. And it's really important. It's a high time. We are in 2022, and still we are using words like ladies and gentlemen, hi sir and ma'am. So I think those are the things which still kind of bothers me. And it's even if I tell, even if sometimes I'm telling to the agent that I'm a gender non-conforming person, or I'm somebody who doesn't identify with sir or ma'am, they still kind of go ahead and do the same thing because they don't know the word of gender neutrality or gender non-binariness. So I think if that is the situation, there is again a step where you need to educate your employees about the LGBTQ+ spectrum or gender neutrality spectrum, and then they would be able to identify it. Why are we doing it? Why corporates have to do it? If they want to serve the customers in a far more better way, if they want to be empathetic with the customers, so it's an extra mile you can definitely walk. So I think that is something which I felt while I was writing this article, and thought of putting it across, because BPO industry is something which is so interactive across the world. So they definitely have something where they can change and bring more perspective or bring more cake to the business.
Awesome. This is really cool. Let me go ahead and take a few questions that we've got here.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, there's one person who's asking, do you think or do you see that this awareness about inclusion and diversity is equally required in the schooling and college environment, so that when people come into professional field, they're already aware and sensitive towards it? Or do you think that, there is an age after which only people get to know about it? So they might want to, kind of know it when they are ready for knowing about it.
So I think, it's better to kind of make the children aware than that of leave, for a right age. So I think that is the best way of, answering this. And I think that, schooling is is a way where we are actually learning about a lot of stuff. So it should definitely have it start from the schooling, and at least usage of words like good touch and bad touch can start around 5 or 6 years of age, once you are kind of going ahead and learning about things which are really required. And as and when you turn into puberty, you need to know about the entire sexuality and gender in totality, so that you become a good human being. Now, what exactly happens is like, if we kind of just do a census of how exactly we as a person would know about our sexualities or gender, it's only after 18 years of age, and that too, it's not a source which we are learning from. It's basically from the internet or from places which we shouldn't be actually learning it from. So I think that is something which is really important to put it in the education system. So if we do that, what exactly will happen is like there's a structure of learning. So a 5-year-old will learn what exactly is important for him or them, and a 6-year-old will learn about what is important for them, and so on and so forth. They will know in a kind of a chronological way, or in a kind of a step-by-step way, rather than kind of knowing something which is unethical or unsourceful from a different perspective altogether. So I think those are some of the things which is a better way of understanding. And schools has to adopt it as well, slowly or steadily, and start this conversation.
Cool. You spoke about, people getting to know about it. What was your journey of knowing that, you are, say, for example, not going to follow a typical norm of being a male or a female and rather, have your own identity? When did you identify it? And from that time to, I think, your marriage last year, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about this entire journey?
Yeah, so it actually took me around 21 years to realize that there's a word called as gender fluid. So before that, I was just kind of working with a lot of queer people, and the word queer was being kind of used to generalize it, the entire LGBTQI plus spectrum. I was sure that I'm not a lesbian because I'm not born as a woman, and I'm not somebody who's solely attracted to men. So I'm not a homosexual person as well, but I was attracted to multiple people of multiple gender spectrum. And that was something which I realized slowly and steadily when I started interacting and seeing multiple people from multiple spectrum. So I think that is where I caught the fire. And once I was able to understand it. It was more internal, like how I feel myself. So am I that person who's born, who's quite macho, or who's like, idea of masculinity, or is something where there's a feminine side of me? So those were the questions which I used to put on myself. And I was not able to define it because I was not aware about the word in the very first place. So 21 years, I got to know about this, the word which was actually being there. And how I got to know is that I went for a seminar which was about gender and sexuality, and there were a lot of people who were kind of using these words, and from there I kind of picked up. So how did I come out was a kind of really funny thing. So to 2018, the 377 was struck down, and there was a journalist who was actually doing some story for. The 377. They reached out to me and said, like, can you give some quotes? How do you feel and all that thing? So I gave the entire quotes. I gave everything which I was feeling about. And then they said, what is your sexual orientation or gender orientation? And I said, like, I'm gender fluid. So, and that was a very first coming out. And what the person has done is they went to a newspaper. They put as 21 years old dancer came out as gender fluid on a newspaper. So that's how I kind of came out to the world, including my mom and dad as well. And post that, it was a step-by-step process. I figured out about my sexuality. I got a word called as bisexual or pansexual. There's a difference between bi and pan, but for me, it's like the same. Like, it's basically attraction to all the genders. So I use bi and pan as a kind of alternatively whenever I'm trying to express my sexuality. And when I do that, I have to tell people that I'm attracted to all the genders irrespective of what they have. Like I'm attracted to both romantically and sexually to all the genders. So those are some of the things which I have to kind of put in, and that's how I kind of came in. And in 2019, sorry, not 19, 2020. I met my partner in a family function, and since then we had a conversation. So I came out to her, and then we thought like, okay, this is a wonderful journey. So from there, she's aware about my drag as well. So from there, it was more of a, I would say, a linear way of falling to her and then getting married. So it's more of a, I would say, I didn't kind of predict that part of getting married. So officially, I'm the India's only drag queen who's got married to a heterosexual woman, which is funny, but still. So that's it is.
Wow, it looks like you've had so much, and I'm like, it looks like you are happy about, how the things have unfolded. It has been, I think, to me, it is very, very difficult. At the same time, it really needs one person to decide what their identity is, and then come out open and say that, hey, this is what it is, and it's absolutely fine. In West, we have seen it much more open way now, but the whole idea of FiveS talking about inclusivity, diversity, impact is largely about creating that real open culture, right? We have, in fact, as an organization, we've had a couple of such instances wherein obviously, we are more of men-driven or rules-driven organization, and somebody would not take it, very openly, or somebody would not like it as well. At the same time, it's very important for all of us being human to accept the way people are. So, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would want to talk about it, but they do not because of the taboo, because of the fear that they would be left out. in terms of your own journey, do you think, or have you seen anything which is hindering your growth because of your sexual orientation, or anywhere you feel that people do not include you or think of you from growth perspective?
So I think, yeah, that's definitely, not as a, not as a part of corporate, but I would say more of if we are seeing it in a way of, national representation or spaces where, there's specific, representation, which has been kind of shown a couple of times onto the mainstream space, like especially I'm talking about mainstream media or mainstream, what we call the movies, places where there's still a lot of, misrepresentation or there's no representation for queer people. And I think that is the space which always, helps or kind of changes the society in a far more, I would say, lateral way, or it doesn't help us in making the world, I would say inclusive because of the misrepresentation which is happening in the media space. So I think that those are some of the things where I feel, sometimes that my identity is not being represented, or I can't see myself on the other side. But having said that, it's also something which I would understand is like, each and every time since we are born queer, we need to barge into a straight space and tell them that okay, we are existing. So I think that is a one way of going ahead and telling people, like it happened first with the woman, and then it's coming to queer people as well, that we need to barge into space and tell them that okay, we are existing, and the fight is real. And as and when we kind of raise our voice, I think the world will adjust, or the world will be able to understand and seek us in a far more better way. So I think that is something which one should be driven with, to go ahead, barge into space, and ask for your space, which is really required.
Okay, interesting. Let's go ahead and maybe look at a few more questions that we've got. Somebody has asked, please expand on your comment that your employer would have an issue if you name them, especially since you are delivering the DEIB training internally.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Can you help me once again?
I think during the beginning of the conversation, you spoke about your employer might have an issue if you name them, or rather, you said that I would not want to name the employer that I work with. So the question is that why would they have an issue, especially since you're delivering diversity, equity, inclusion, training internally? Don't you think that this is also an indication of being open and inclusive?
Yeah. So the problem is, like, I work for for a financial company, firstly, and secondly, they are paying me for doing the job, which I'm not doing as of now. I'm actually doing something which is, again, I'm passionate about, which is basically about diversity and inclusion. So if I kind of take this as my passion, or if I kind of take this as my my career, I have to leave my job. So there is always a conflict of interest. Like, I'm not representing my company, but I'm basically kind of coming as an individual, and hence I thought like it's not something which is ideal for me to kind of take the name, okay, which seems like I'm representing a company. So that is one of the reason which I think is a situation, but it's not that the company has a problem. It's just that they're not paying for me for doing DNI. So I think that is where the conflict of interest is.
Cool. Understood. I think, this is a fair point, because had we invited you from corporate perspective, would have obviously spoken about how things are. But because this is in personal capacity, and I'm really loving the conversation, right? So, and I'm sure so do people, because from the coffee chats that I've had so far, I'm seeing more flurry of questions coming in, and people are asking and they're opening up, and I think which is really, really good. Another question before I move on with my thoughts is basically, do you really cherish moments when you see any opening in on LinkedIn or any job site wherein the employer openly says that we are hiring for diversity and inclusive candidates, or you feel that it should be just open, and when the application is submitted, there should be an option, or rather, kind of, it should not be too transparent, too open? Or you think it's fine if it is open and people know that yes, there is a diversity and inclusivity drive happening at an organization? Which one is better for you? What do you think?
So it depends. Like, I won't expect an MNC to kind of come ahead and do that, open thing. like, we are only hiring LGBTQI plus people. It doesn't make any sense because you already have an employee base which is more than kind of 10K or 15K or more. And if at this point in time you are not having anybody who is from the LGBTQI plus community, which is actually telling that your company is not something which is gender as well as sexually inclusive, sexual orientational inclusive. So I think that is something which I would be surprised. But if it's a startup which is kind of looking for it, I would be I would not be skeptical, but I would be kind of happy about, okay, at least they're trying to at least have a couple of members from the community be a part of it. Having said that, this is something which I want to kind of point out as well. A lot of the times what exactly happens is when they have this certain drives which are only for the LGBTQI plus community, they hire a slapstick number, like 5 or 6 numbers, and the positions which are given to this 5 or 6 people are not something which are already been there. Like, they are not being hired as a customer service representative. They would give this fancy kind of a title for them where they're kind of hiring, which is different from the people who are already there. And when we're kind of differentiating, their roles and responsibilities might be same, but the title is different, which is a kind of a significant indicator that, okay, this is a diversity, this is the diversity hire. And I think that is a problem because when you're hiring a person, if you're not including them within your own workforce or giving any kind of an identity which is basically to kind of show them that they're exclusive, I think that is a problem, and that kind of creates more of a cultural differences within the workspace. So I think I shouldn't be I won't be kind of encouraging that kind of a processes when they are being hiding. And secondly, also, when it comes to the idea of job description, I've seen a lot of times where this is a really silly mistake, but there's this wonderful job opening which is there. They ask us to fill up the application form. I open the application form. There are first name, last name, and then there's no pronouns. There's no there's no idea of what gender or what sexuality. They're just male and female. So those are some of the very basic things. Like, you promise that it's an LGBTQI plus organization, but you don't have multiple gender labels to kind of tag in the application form, or you don't have a space where they can tell their pronouns. So those are some of the things which are more of a performative way of inclusion than that of actually doing it. So I would be still skeptical about whether one should have an exclusive LGBTQI plus drives in the very first place. Having said that, if a company is looking forward to kind of maximize or kind of get equal amount of representation, like equal number of women employees, equal number of male employees, equal number of employees from the the spectrum, LGBTQI plus spectrum, I would kind of go ahead with it. So that is the intent which a corporate should have, and not to kind of just hire people for the sake of hiring it.
Very interesting. I'm sure that a lot of people are. So even I see some of my HR colleagues who are kind of making notes, and they are very interested about this subject, particularly in terms of your own personal experience working in corporates. You worked on the customer service side of things. One of the biggest takeaways for me is how your script goes, and how do people actually ask about how do I call you, right? Or how do I refer to you, right? I think this is something which has been missing within the entire system, and all those pieces have to come together. While I see that it's important, but what I also feel is that it looks like it is going to be some time before the entire world adjusts to it. But is it important? Yes, it is. It is required very much, because if you don't like to be called a female, if you're a male, you would obviously not want to be tagged to a particular gender if you're not wanting to be. So this is something which is really important. And then how do the organizations put this into process, right from hiring to training to customer service to work? I think it's going to be very important. From your experience working in corporate, do you think or what are your views? I'm not talking about this job or previous jobs. It's an open question in terms of what has been your experience of working in the industry. Do you think that you've got growth, or you've been complimented for your work? Or is it because I have a fear that if I say something, I might be in soup? So rather talk nicest things, right? What has been your experience so far, and any particular compliment that you got for your work which you cherish?
So I think it is like I've always spoken my mind when I'm coming to a kind of office, because if my office or my corporate is not listening to me, there's no point in me being a resource of that particular corporate. So that is kind of my general motto. And when it comes to basically the idea of queer inclusion, so I'm kind of vocal about each and every point in time. Like I kind of get go even from the very first day of it. And one of the kind of compliment which I have got, it was from a company which I kind of went, and within one month I said, like, I'm not being a part of, I can't be a part of this organization because it's not inclusive. So when I kind of pointed out the flaws which are there in the policy and how exactly the company structure is, I kind of quit. They gave me a relieving, and I was able to kind of, I moved to a next job. After 6 months, I get a call from the, I think there was a new diversity and inclusion manager, global leader, who was being placed for the very first time after I left 6 months. And they kind of give me a call, and they asked me, can you help me in kind of understanding what are the things which are basically needed for my company? So I think, and because of, that resignation, or because of that, abruptly telling the management that, okay, you are not inclusive, helped them to kind of at least put a board member who's actually looking into it and kind of changing the ways how the corporates are working. So I think that is one of the way how I felt that, okay, my voice was kind of gave a positive term. So I think I never feared about, especially I might fear about some things like which are not related to my gender and sexuality, like basically kind of taking a leave from a manager, or kind of, taking an extra time or something like that. Sometimes it's fearful because by the end of it, I have to work. And but when it comes to the identities or gender or sexuality perspective, it's my, say additional duty to kind of ensure that my organization is inclusive. And if it's not, there's no purpose of me being there. So I think that is the point of view which I usually kind of take in wherever I'm kind of going. And it always helped me in ensuring that the culture of the community is changing within the organization as well.
Cool. So before we just move on, I just want to ask the audience, do you think that you would want to see how does a drag performance look like? If yes, then please put in comments, and I would request Patruni to give a flavor of what it looks like and have a very small performance towards the end. So if you want, please comment, and I would like to see how many people want it. Right. As we move on, what are those 1, 2, 3 things you think that you have been able to help your organizations where you work to kind of become a much more inclusive workspace rather than just saying it?
Yeah. So I think one of the thing was, when I stepped into the organization, I was aware that there's a BRG, or private BRG, which is working with the LGBTQI plus community within the workspace. Or, there were employees who were kind of identifying and open about it in spaces like UK and, other sectors or other spaces. But when it came to India, there was not, there was a BRG, but there were no people or members who can kind of modulate or take it forward. So I think I stepped right over there on the face to kind of, take a lead on it. And, we were kind of organizing training workshops for, I started with my own team, which, I kind of proposed it to a manager, and we asked all of us to kind of go ahead and take the workshop. We took a workshop about, how inclusion happens within our own space, our own group. And then this was something which was put as a, train the trainer program for my manager going ahead and training a couple of managers to how to be inclusive. And the chain reaction happened. There's a global level modification of the the anti-discrimination policy which has been there. So basically there was inclusion about some of the words which are kind of coming from the Indian spectrum, or the Indian diaspora, and we were able to educate and kind of inform them about it. And then there is also visibility, like that is something which is really important. If your organization is being inclusive, it's your opportunity also to kind of go ahead and tell it to the world that you are inclusive. Because unless and until you tell, no queer person would like to come and join your organization. So it's really important to be out there and hold that flag and scream loud. So I think I helped my organization to be that as well, like have some conversations within the Indian spectrum, so that they openly talk about the policies which are being there. There's a communication between multiple organizations, and the policies are being changed and modified as per the feedback given by the other organization. So I think the dialogue was something which was really important, and there were changes. So far, we have been identifying, or we have been kind of putting active work in opening up our own space, or opening up our own community of employees to have active conversations with their manager. So I think those were some of the things which was kind of working out.
Cool, awesome, and wow. This is something which looks like people are so much connected to this coffee chat session that one, obviously, I can see that a number of people have said that they would want to see a drag performance. How does it look like? What happens in a drag, and how really it works, and what is the messaging that it gives? So before we just move on to the last section, I would like to say that this has been phenomenal. There are many more conversations that we can have. I would want to kind of explore possibilities of having you in person with us as well. But before we move on, I'm like, what is the messaging that you said that you have a different purpose? You look at drag differently. What is the messaging you want to give, or you usually give when you are performing drag? I saw a video you performing in a mall a few days back. A little kid came and started dancing with you, unleashing themselves. So yeah, just want to know about it curiously.
Yeah, I think my messaging is like to kind of give a picture, or I become the PPT of gender. For you to kind of seek the idea of gender in the very first perspective. Like if I'm exaggerating my gender, if you are seeing and kind of accepting me, I'm pretty sure that you'd kind of accept a trans person who's working with you as a colleague as well. So I think that is something which drag as a person is kind of giving, and kind of also telling that there's not a certain way of gender expression. Like a person can express themselves in a far more different way. So times when we kind of make fun of another co-worker just because he was wearing a pink shirt. So it's time to kind of change. So if I'm walking within a corporate space, they definitely can't use that joke on me, because I'm far more pinkier than that what the other person would see. So I think that is how my drag becomes a message or a PowerPoint presentation to tell people that this is how inclusion should be, and this is how you should be going ahead and accepting people in the far more better way. So I think I think that's the messaging, and I use drag as a way of activism. I don't have to hold a placard and shout at people, which I do as well. But it's basically of dressing up and presenting myself in a far more way of genders, where they will be just able to see it and kind of conceive, or kind of accept me for who I am. So I think that is the purpose of my drag.
Wow, awesome. This is great. So let's move on to the last part. I think we've almost reached time. We couldn't start on time because Patruni was getting ready, and now why it took a bit of time. So can we have the last performance? And guys, do enjoy it. Pour in your comments. What do you see? How curious you are? Please, Patruni, all yours. Thank you so much.
Great. So I would be going ahead and singing, 3 songs, which is a kind of a medley. One is in Hindi and one is in Telugu, which I have written myself. And I would try to sing an English song as well, but you should not judge me on my pronunciation. So that is something which I need an agreement from you. So let's start off with the first song, which is a Hindi song. It's a Bihari song, and I hope you would like it. You'll understand the tunes of it. It talks about the idea of how migrant workers kind of move from one place to the other. We're all migrant workers. We move from our, the place we are born in, and we kind of work in some other space. So this is the connection of the land kind of calling those people back. So it says that, the train which is kind of taking these migrant workers is a Biden or I would say a villain or a vamp, which is kind of separating me from my husband on the other side. So this goes in this way. रेलिया बैरन पिया को लिए जाए रे, 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 रेलिया बैरन अरे गाने सहजवा के सैया बोल रहे गाने सहजवा के सैया बोल रहे गाने सहजवा के सैया बोल रहे आगी लागे सहर जल जाए रे, आगी लागे सहर जल जाए रे, So that was the first song. The second is a song which talks about, it says that Pride Masamana, which is like, this is the Pride month. And I'm kind of explaining the ideas of sexuality and gender in a far more Telugu way, because I wrote this song for a 6-year-old kid to explain them about gender and sexuality. So I hope this would also something which you might understand a little bit if you're understanding the English word, which is there in it. So I think let me quickly go and do that as well. Iti Pride Masamana, Iti Pride Masamana, Kasa sensitize Jasanana, Kakampulitanna, Ajayide Kuda Antanda Pride Masamana. Iti Pride Masamana, Kasa sensitize Jasanana, Kakampulitanna, Ajayide Kuda Antanda Pride Masamana. Same-sex ఇష్టపడితే homosexuals అంటారు, same-sex ఇష్టపడితే heterosexuals అంటారు, ఇద్దరిని ఇష్టపడితే bisexuals అంటారు, అందరిని ఇష్టపడితే pansexuals అంటారు. ఇది Pride మాసమన్న కాస్త సెన్సిటైజేషన్ అన్న కమ్యూనిటీ అన్న అది ఇది కూడా ఉంటారన్న Pride మాసమన్న. So that's the second song. I thought of singing a third song, which is English, but then I realized it's Independence Day, so I need to sing one song which kind of resonates the idea of it. So this is sorry for not singing an English song, but singing a song which is quite, being kind of diverse in its own nature, as we are talking about diversity and inclusion. So this song is called as Baje Sargam Har Taraf Se Gunje Banke Deshrag. So I'm kind of singing it in my own tunes, from where I kind of picked it up. I hope you will like that as well. Baje, baje, sargam baje, 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 sargam baje, har tan meete sorgam baje, har tan meete sorgam baje, ताल कदमों पे आएगा रे, ताल कदमों पे आएगा रे, लब से जागे गीत है सा गूंजे बन कर देश राग, देश राग, देश राग, बजे सरगम हर तरफ से गूंजे बन कर देश राग, देश राग, देश राग.
Wow, 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 wow. I'm like, I just had super, super fun. I asked people who were dancing to the tunes. I for sure was. A lot of people are raising, toes. They are clapping. They're saying that they would want to see you. They would want to meet with you. And it looks like, people have really, really, really enjoyed this conversation, your performance, your songs, and the explanation of what you really mean by that. I think this is really, really amazing. The whole idea of keeping this conversation today on the 15th of August was to make sure that we understand what is the meaning of independence. How can you be independent in your thoughts? How can you be more open? How can you be more vocal and not really punished for it, rather welcome for your thoughts, your beliefs, and start with yourself, right? I think this is really, really amazing, because I'm like, I also feel guilty now from for my college days, wherein I was in college, saw a guy wearing pink shirt and said, "Hey, look at this guy, man. What's happening?" Right? So, and I think this is something which is very, very important for us to know. A lot of people would have taken inputs from little things that you spoke about. I'm going to go back with a lot of learning. People have thoroughly enjoyed it. I believe it has gone live on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so very much. I can't thank you enough. Would love to meet you in person. People have already said that we would want to see you in person. So it looks like I think the whole idea or purpose of this coffee chat, is fulfilled. And what better than completing 1 year of coffee chats, wherein we just spoke about certain topics, but this is something which has been my personal best, and I'm not boasting about it. I'm really, really meaning every word that I'm saying. Thank you so very much. Appreciate your time and look forward to see you in person. Thank you for getting ready. Show your performance and showering so much of knowledge, love, warmth. Thank you so very much. You have a blissful life ahead, and would love to see you soon.
Thank you so much for giving this opportunity and for kind of engaging this wonderful conversation. I really kind of spoke a lot of things from the heart, and that is something which was really beautiful. So yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the wonderful comments as well. I was just kind of reading, one after the other. So thank you so much for all the audience who are kind of staying with us and, tuned to this particular conversation.
Cool. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Good night. Enjoy your evening.